Good afternoon, everybody. Wonderful to see you, those of you that have flipped your screen on, and wonderful to see your name in black and white and know that you're attending today. Today's it's a fantastic session. Andrew, I'm not sure if it was you that was the brain trust behind this, but I couldn't think of something better to talk about and discuss with the group today, as we're all kind of like getting back to work a little bit and maybe trying to digest a bit what has gone on the last couple of months. So again, thank you everyone for attending today, and thank you, Andrew, for putting this together. You have a special guest with you today, Eric. And Eric, I'll let you take the floor here in a second, but just want to thank everybody for their time always and participating in these events, and Andrew, always for your time and expertise and volunteering. I know you're super busy and busy ramping up and getting your staff getting up and going. So thank you as always.
My pleasure. Thanks for everybody for joining. I'll give a quick intro to Eric and let him take the floor. I've known Eric for a long time. We haven't, I've been following him, which, like the beauty of social media, we haven't chatted in probably years. I don't know, it could be 5, 10, maybe more than that. But I've been following his story for the last few years. And he's always been somebody I respected. And, he switched gears. I envied him for his prior career in sports with the NBA and other professional leagues. And then he switched gears recently. And it's funny, I think we've over the years, we're hearing more and more about, mental health, and fortunately it's becoming more of a, accepted topic and more of a conversation, which I think everybody can acknowledge is needed. So, having the ability, to bring Eric on as an expert who's, like us, presents on this kind of stuff, presents not like on this, but presents, daily, and just having, that kind of knowledge, I think, is going to help us all. Hopefully we can all get a little, bit of nuggets from today to help us kind of, I guess, deal with what we've been dealing with and, move on and be stronger. I know the last few months have been a struggle. Every morning I'm, ready to go. And then by 1 o'clock, I feel like I've been punched in the face about 5, 10 times. And it's, hopefully it'll ease up. It's funny. I remember Saturday I woke up, full of energy, and then, Monday came around again. I'm like, oh, but we want to try to stay consistent, try to stay positive. It's a challenge. So, Eric, I guess just, I gave you a little background. Obviously it's been a lot of ups and downs in our business and for the brokers more specifically. But why don't you give us a little background on, your experience, and then we can, like always, we can open up to questions, and, hopefully everybody can, kind of give their thoughts and, maybe you can help them, with some tips.
For sure. Yeah, no, thank you all for having me on. I'm just checking the time right now. So my job for the next 30 minutes, I guess, will be to entertain you guys. Usually something that takes me about 2 hours, I'm going to try to condense it to that 30 minutes. This is what I usually start with when I start working with any organization, because there's so much uncertainty around mental health, what it means, how it's defined, what people think of it, how it makes you feel. There's so many different topics. And by the way, I was in that same boat not too long ago. So if you look at this slide right here, and Andrew was talking about being envious or whatever of the jobs I was in before. I guess if you want to call chasing the corporate America bullshit ladder for a while envious and fine. But, so we grew up actually all playing basketball together in similar towns. I was fortunate enough to get into Cornell University and walked onto the basketball team my senior year. And, like many athletes, had the desire to continue the relationship with sports in some way. And so was fortunate enough to, skipping through this quickly, but you see what's up here is it's partially my career path, partially my life path. And I'll get to that when I get to the point where you see Crash up there. Is started at the NBA league office. David Stern was there at the time. Had an awesome opportunity to go around and present to the players on something called the business of basketball, which was helping them understand the collective bargaining agreement and how revenues were generated and how that ultimately played into their salary. You had a lot of guys coming out of high school at the time who thought, oh, there's these billionaire owners who just take their checks out and write me $1 million contracts. They weren't exactly understanding, coming directly out of high school, the way that revenues are generated through ticket sales and sponsorship sales and TV rights. And so that was an unbelievable experience at a young age, and getting to travel around and present to players and people that I had idolized the years prior. And to kind of get my feet wet in terms of what it was like being a professional in this industry. But you all being in essentially what is sales, like so many of us, no matter what our job is selling. I was told at a pretty young age, so 5 years into working at the NBA, if I wanted to do anything in this industry, I had to learn how to sell. And so an opportunity came up. I went out to Chicago to go become the director of sales and service for the first standalone WNBA team, which was the Chicago Sky, second logo that you see there. And that parlayed into a position with the Phoenix Suns as their director of sales and service. With the Suns, it was the Suns, the Mercury, and a ECHL hockey team. It was called the Phoenix Roadrunners. And so, living the life in my mind, nothing to be upset about, living out in Scottsdale in my upper 20s, lower 30s. Then this opportunity comes around in New Jersey to come back east to go work for the Devils. The Devils, for those of you who are from this area originally or just have been here long enough, that they're looked at as like the stepchild to all the other 8 professional sports teams in the New York, New Jersey area. And so to me, it was a cool opportunity to have the X on my back and to prove that we could change the dynamic of something. And inherited 3,000 season ticket holders when we got there. 4 years later, left them with 12,000 season ticket holders. Of course, it helps when you go on a Stanley Cup final run in 2012. But I don't have a ring on my finger, not because I'm not married, which I'm not either, but also because we didn't win a ring. So it sucks to go that far and lose. I do have a ring going back to the Suns days with the Phoenix Mercury. So if anyone knows the name Diana Taurasi and that whole group from UConn, she helped us get a title back with the WNBA team. But you see what happens is I went from there 4 years with the Devils, and I got a position that was titled Chief Revenue Officer. And I joked a little bit with Andrew about chasing the corporate ladder bullshit. Sports is very hierarchical. In each one of those positions, it was manager, becomes director, becomes VP. And finally, I get this spot with the Florida Panthers. They had just purchased the team, these 2 new owners, actually from New York. The name of the company is called Virtue Financial. The owner's name was Vinny Viola. Still the owner right now, great guy, military background, West Point grad. And he brings 2 of us in to really gut out the business operations group and started over from scratch, which is a dream opportunity when you're working in sports, despite it being a challenging market. And so I get down there, and it's a lot of interviewing, a lot of culture setting, a lot of setting up processes, because they literally left us with no one in the office. They wanted us to essentially start from zero. And I'm loving the day to day. I'm going out, having a good time out on South Beach, doing the enjoyable kind of social part of South Florida, Miami. And about 6 months into my tenure there, I just start to notice that I'm losing interest in things outside of the office. I no longer have interest in going out with friends, no longer interest in going to the gym, going on dates, watching my teams on TV. And I justified that, and I'm sure many of you who spend so much time with your work and enjoy your work justify it also, is when work is in place and feels good and feels like you're getting the dopamine hits from it because it's enjoyable, you don't question things as much. So for me, it was, well, everything in work is going fine right now. We're building the team the way the owners have asked us to. We've got a great group that's been coming in over the last couple of months. What's there to be upset about? So what? So I don't enjoy things right now. I'll push through, and eventually they'll come back. And that excuse only lasted about 2 weeks, because I woke up one morning and I was talking about real estate. I'm pushing myself out of my bed in my apartment on Las Olas Boulevard, and it's like I'm pushing myself out of quicksand. And I go, this is why I mentioned the real estate comment, I go to walk to my closet, because you actually have room in Florida to walk like 5 or so feet to your closet, as opposed to New York, where it's right next to your bed. And it feels like I have cinder blocks on my feet. I remember looking in the closet, and it felt like a bomb went off, even though everything was completely in the place it should be and was organized. I couldn't make sense of anything. And I started questioning my own brain. I remember the first thing I did was I looked at a picture that I had of my nieces, the 2 people who are the most important people in the world to me. and I recited out loud their first names, and I tried to remember their middle names, and I couldn't. It was like my brain was being hijacked. And I made my way into the office that day. I kind of just was able to grin and bear it. I get into the office, and I'm looking at the computer kind of like I am right now as I get in my seat. And those of you who remember the game Light Brights back in the day, I'm looking at my screen, and instead of it looking like it's emails, it looks like it's light brights on my screen, like everything's flashing. And I look up at my staff. It's in front of me. It's about 70 people right now. Usually when you look at your staff, you're thinking, okay, these are my season ticket sellers. These are my group sellers. These are my sponsorship sales people. It felt like Grand Central Station to me. It felt like everyone was moving 1,000 miles a minute, and I just can't keep up with what's going on in front of me. So that night we would, again, in the spirit of sales, we would invite prospects to games, and we would have each rep responsible for having 2 prospects into a suite in between the first and second period. And you'd give an impassioned speech about the direction that the team's going in. It would come from the heart, and you talk about the new ownership group coming in, and just drafting 2 new players in the first round, and the excitement level that's surrounding the team. Well, these folks show up into the suite between the first and second period, and I can't put more of a sentence together than, "Hi, my name is Eric. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer with the Florida Panthers. It's great to meet you. This is our team president, Matt." And I just walk out. And what I could describe to you what it felt like in my head at the time, it almost felt like, there was this last bit of juice or energy that was left in my battery. And whatever I needed to say at that time, the energy just vanished. And then I walked back to my office. And the rest of the game went on. I sat on my computer just staring there, trying to figure out what was going on with me. And my owner came in afterwards, Vinny, who I mentioned, with our team president. So Matt, the team president, was also West Point grad. And they looked me in the eyes. They said, "Eric, we can tell something's going on. Is everything okay? Is there anything we could help with?" And to give you some context, this is the beginning of 2015. So this was not a time when people were talking about mental health in any way. And especially in an open format, especially in a work format in a corporate environment like that. And I guess, the fact that they had the background, the military background, and had seen friends go through some challenges, there was a little bit of perspective there. But they said to me, "Eric, whatever you're dealing with right now, we can get through this together. Please don't feel an obligation to, spend every second in the office. Take as much time as you need, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, come back, hit the ground running. We like what's getting built here." And so when I heard 3 months, those of us who are all on this call are old enough to know that we grew up without learning about mental health in school. It wasn't a requirement. New York State was the first state to require mental health education in 2018, July 1st. So anything before that, we were lucky if we learned this in school, that depression means sadness, which it doesn't, that anxiety means nervousness, which it doesn't, and that PTSD is exclusively servicemen and women, which it's not. And we also learned that if you have problems, you go to the guidance counselor, and those are the kids who go to the guidance counselors are the ones who have the problems. And so that was the education that we got. So beyond that, all I knew about mental health was what we saw on television commercials where Big Pharma is able to promote directly to us. I saw 30-second commercials where the first 15 seconds were a sad face and sad music and a cloud over the sad face. And then all of a sudden, 15 seconds in, someone takes a pill and it becomes beautiful music and the sun is shining, the birds are chirping. So in my mind, well, if you took these things called antibiotics when you were younger, when you had strep throat, bronchitis, pneumonia, and in 2 days they made you feel better, if my office is giving me 3 months to get better and I could go home and take these things called antidepressants, which I've never taken before, but I got to assume they work in some similar format to how these other drugs work, I'll eventually get better. If it takes 1 pill and 4 weeks, fine. If it takes another pill and it takes 8 weeks, fine. These guys have said 3 months in the back of my mind. And my purpose and my identity as a sports executive, I'm thinking I can get back to myself in that time. And so I go home to New York, grew up in Merrick, Long Island, keep my apartment in Florida just in case I'm able to get back. So I'm still paying the rent there. So the only place I can live is at home, the twin bed I grew up in despite being 6'4". And I lay in that bed and I go to a doctor the second day I'm home who I leave the office from with 5 prescription medications to start on. And what he tells me is, after me filling out a chart, which ended up not being the diagnosis, but I'll share with you, is that I have a shitload of anxiety on top of a shitload of depression. And the terminology that was used was I need heavy artillery to knock myself out of this. So again, with the backdrop of having taken antibiotics and them having worked when you were younger, where else is your mind going to go other than, okay, drugs is the way to go? So I started on those 5 medications, and my next 2.5 years, you know, again, this is a shortened version of the presentation. I wish I had the picture to show you. I spent laying horizontally on my bed, staring at the ceiling, not watching TV, not listening to the radio because I had no interest and couldn't focus and couldn't follow a plot line. I barely answered my friends' text messages other than to say I was alive. And over that 2.5-year span, these doctors tried over 50 different psychotropic drug combinations on me, and none of them worked. And I kept having awful side effects, and I was cramped in my bed, just waiting for each day to pass by, hoping that I could just fall asleep and the next day I'd wake up and some miracle would happen and I'd feel better. So that finally led to a doctor telling me I should try a different treatment called TMS therapy, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation, where they put a helmet on your head and they shoot electromagnetic waves in your brain. And the science behind it is supposed to be that the neurons start firing again because of the way in which the waves are hitting your brain, as if the neurons weren't firing before. And that's the reason why my brain's not been working. And so I do 23 sessions of that in Manhattan, 23 days in a row, because you're supposed to do it every single day, $350 a session, not covered by insurance. And on the 23rd night, I can't fall asleep. So day 24, I wake up, and for the first time in my life, I've developed a concept of a suicidal ideation, something I'd never felt before in my life. And the way it felt was, I'm looking at the side here, kind of using my phone, but I'm looking at this bottle of pills that are fully stocked on my counter. And I'm literally on my bed, sitting on my hand, stopping myself from going towards the bottle because I feel this magnetic pull, like I need to swallow that bottle. I need to swallow that bottle. And no matter how much there was this rational thinking part of my brain saying, you've just fought for 2.5 years, you don't want to do that, I couldn't shut my brain off from thinking that. And so fortunate being around family, I asked them to take me to, of all places, a psych ward, which is a scary thing to say. And so we called up all the doctors that I had seen. Their best recommendation was for me to go to Cornell Med, top facility. So they deemed it in New York City, or even in the Northeast for that matter. And I go, and I'm skipping a lot of the details of what the psych ward experience was like. But I meet with the attending psychiatrist the first day, and she looks at my chart. She looks back at me. She says, wow, Eric, you've tried everything there is. Your last resort is to do shock therapy. And when I tell people that story, people think that I'm referring to shock therapy as a thing that shocked me, no pun intended. But what shocked me was hearing last resort. Because for someone who was just fighting for 2.5 years and was basically Western medicine's guinea pig, trying every type of drug that I could possibly imagine, I was willing to try anything there was. And to hear from this doctor who's supposed to be the top of her industry that this was my last resort, it obviously is pretty deflating. And so I did 5 weeks, 12 sessions of shock therapy, where they put electrodes on your brain. They lay you down in this tiny little room that looks like a dentist's office. They put a blood pressure cuff on your ankle. They give you anesthesia in the form of propofol, which is the stuff that Michael Jackson died in the overdose from. And they basically shock your brain into seizure while you're under general anesthesia, hoping essentially that your brain's going to restart. It's literally like hoping that after my computer blue screens, if I throw it against the ground and then hit the power button again, something is going to kind of shake it up again and it's going to get moving. And that didn't work for me. So I leave the hospital after 5 weeks, no better than I had been on the previous 2.5 years, thinking my life is over because that's what this doctor said, unless Merck or Pfizer invents some miracle pill that's going to knock me out of it. And this is where the story starts to change. So that's the crash right there. But my parents are both educators from back in the day, retired now, but my father was a school principal. My mother was a language teacher, and they go to these continuing education courses all the time. And so they were brought by a friend to a course on what was called integrative breathing practices. I didn't know what integrative meant, and I'd never done a breathing practice in my life. So I said, good luck, and I'll see you when you're back. So they came back. My mother runs in my room. She says, you got to meet this woman that we met tonight, Donna. She's what's called an integrative psychologist. She's a yoga practitioner and a psychologist, and she combines the two. She believes there's a mind-body connection, and she says she helps people who have been through mental health complications to heal in different ways in which they might have tried before. So I go to her office, and I sit down on the couch, and first practitioner in 2.5 years who, instead of asking me what my symptoms are, which was always the first question, what are your symptoms? Here's how we can help you. She asked me to tell her about my life, which, put yourself in those shoes. If you're asked broadly what's gone on in your life, where are you going to begin? So I began with my earliest memory, which is, that's a picture of me hugging my older brother. He was 12 years old at this time of this memory. I was 8. And we were both away at a sleepaway camp together. And he broke his femur bone in a sporting accident and had to be rushed to the hospital, put in a body cast after being in traction for a while, and was homeschooled for basically that full year. Comes out of that body cast, and a month later is diagnosed with ALL, which is a children's form of leukemia. Back then, the chemo wasn't as targeted. It takes a lot longer for it to knock the cancer out of your system. It finally does. Miraculously goes into remission, and a month later, he's driving on the Meadowbrook Parkway with his friends, Jeep Wrangler, open Jeep, no seatbelt in the back. Jeep loses control. He flies out of the back of the Jeep, lands on his head on the parkway, cracks his head open, loses partial vision in his eye, is in ICU for a month. Heals from that, goes to college between junior and senior year, feels a pain in his knee. They do all the sports medicine testing. It comes back negative. But what they find is that his cancer's come back. And so this time, a decade later, they really want to knock the cancer out of his system with much stronger drugs. And so they tell us it's actually going to work really well in getting the cancer out, but it could break down the rest of his body. So at this point, we switch places. I'm up at school now. I'm about a sophomore in school. He's a year out in law school, still getting chemo, makes law review while he's getting chemo at Hofstra. And I get a call from my dad that his body has gone into what's called septic shock. So 105 fever develops. They bring him into the hospital. His organs are attacking themselves. He falls into a coma, and he's in that coma as I'm driving back and forth from school for 3 months. So you hear most people in coma, they're a month, maybe a week. You have to make a decision. That's a difficult decision, whether to keep them alive or not. We have no idea if he has any brain activity, or if he does, if he's going to wake from it. He miraculously wakes. He's got his full faculties about him, but his kidneys fail from the rigor of the septic shock. And so now he has to go on dialysis. We all get tested to see who's the closest match. My father donates a kidney to him. That all ends, and in the course of the next year, 3 of my close friends in their 20s pass away unexpectedly of heart conditions. And so when I'm sharing this story with this woman on the couch, her reaction to me is, Eric, is there anything else that's gone on in your life as a child you want to tell me about that affected you, that happened to you? And maybe I was facetious, or I just didn't understand mental health at the time. I reacted and I said, I don't know what you're talking about. None of these things happened to me. They happened to my brother. They happened to my friends, but they didn't happen to me. I wasn't in the Jeep at the time. I wasn't laying in the bed with my brother when he was in the coma. I watched it. And the analogy that she gave me, which I thought was a really good one, is she said, Eric, you're a sports executive. So if you sat in a front row seat for a basketball game, an NBA game, and you had your suit on and your nice press shirt on and your tie, and you had players running up and down the court, coming close to the sideline, 6'7", 7-foot guys, and they're sweating, and their sweat is hitting you as you're on the sideline, guess what? You're going to go home that night. You're going to take your clothes off. You're going to put them in for the dry cleaner, and you're going to shower, and you're going to put something new on the next day. So what I want you to pretend is you still have that same courtside seat, but instead of it being a basketball game, it's a game of life. And you're watching your brother in his game of life wrestling in the middle of that court, and it's a muddy wrestling match. And every move that he's making to stay alive, he's making a move, and that mud is splattering, and it's hitting you. And every single move that your friends are making to stay alive, that mud is splattering, and it's hitting you. The difference with this game versus the basketball game is you're not getting up. You're not taking a shower because you don't know to take a shower. So everything that you're watching in front of you is actually making your whole system dirty. It's getting your face dirty. It's getting your suit dirty. And you're not getting up and you're not cleaning yourself off. What those things are, those are stress and trauma from the events that you watched through people in your life that matter to you. And that stuff is building up inside of you, and it's impacting this brain-body connection that you have. to the point where it's actually taken you down. That's why you've been out of service for the last 2.5 years. And so this whole concept of stress and trauma, maybe again, I was being facetious, but I asked this woman, Don, I said, check my story for a second. Let's talk about every single person in the world. If you're saying watching other people go through things can affect your mental health, well then watching your parents get divorced, watching parents lose a job or lose their house, hearing about the verbal abuse of your friends, hearing about the sexual abuse of your friends, watching your friends get bullied or cyberbullied, hearing about the loss of loved ones of your friends or the sickness of loved ones, watching your other friends get into fights and break up their friendships with each other. So there's not a friggin' person in the world who doesn't deal with some or all of these things. So if we can have our mental health impacted by just some of these things happening to us and happening to us where they're happening through someone else, well then who in this world doesn't deal with mental health complications? That would seem like everyone. And she kind of smiled at me with this sage looking smile. And she said, Eric, that's how I feel about things. That's how, you know, integrative practitioners feel about things. Unfortunately, that's not how our society feels about things. You know, you look at the three that I just put up on the screen right there, loss of public figures. Look at how many people were impacted by the loss of Kobe Bryant. Take away, you know, some of the indiscretions that he might have been known for. You saw the outpouring of love on social media when they lost him. Look at what's going on with the pandemic right now, situationally, and how many people are impacted because of how their routine changed. We'll get into more detail on that one in a little bit. And then think about what's going on from a social justice perspective. Situational things, whether they're happening to us directly or we're watching them happen to other people, they're impacting our mental health. And what you see in these pictures here, you know, it would be weird if I put brown on there to represent that mud hitting us instead of green. So I picked a little bit more of an attractive color, but it's that mud hitting each of our bodies, each of the times these things happen to us, and each of the times we witness them and we live through them. And so me living through all these things with my brother, my level of mud that was on my body, the stress and trauma that built up inside me, not so different from a physical health standpoint in how plaque builds up in your arteries over time and can cause a heart attack or a stroke. Stress and trauma can build up in our system and can cause mental health complications, right? But the problem is we don't understand that as a society. We don't think about it that way. We're not taught it that way. So my doctor, Donna, she sends me to this weekend breathing course called The Art of Living, where I show up. I'm the only man. I'm the only one under 40 at the time, and I'm the only one born in this country. So it's me and 8 Indian women and 9 yoga mats. And I'm like, I feel like a fish out of water. But what I learned in that class probably saved my life is I learned how to do breathing practices. And when I learned about the science of the breathing practices, this wouldn't be the way that they would explain it, but probably what I gleaned from it is if all of us were sitting in a room right now or on the bottom floor and a truck lost control and crashed through the room, none of us were physically injured, but we saw that truck come through the wall, we'd all make this sound. And we stop breathing for a second. Now think about that. That's because of the shock of that truck coming through that wall. We don't expect that to happen. So now think about a truck coming through the wall and all these different things that I listed here on this page and many more. So I'll give you some examples. You're a 30 to 40-year-old man or woman and you have parents, and one of your parents is sick and has cancer. Well, you're waking up every day wondering, is the truck going to come through the wall? Am I going to hear that they got into a worse place, that they went from stage 2 to stage 3 cancer, that they're going into hospice, that they have one week left to live? This is watching that truck come through the wall on an everyday basis. You have a child, again, same 30 or 40-year-old man or woman who's going to school every day and is getting bullied. Kids coming home every day, you're wondering, is he going to be crying when he comes home? Is she going to be upset? Is she going to be self-harming? Is he going to be actually doing worse than self-harming and actually trying to take his or her own life? Again, the truck coming and crashing through the wall all the time. You have a boss and you have high expectations. You got someone like Andrew who's just, you know, cracking the whip and wants to make sure you're making sales happen all the time. Just giving you a hard time, Andrew. So you're coming in every day and you're having that truck come through the wall on an everyday basis. Eventually what's going to happen over time is you're going to change the way you're breathing. Your system's going to change the way it expects things to happen, and you're going to be fearful of worst case scenarios. And that is how your system changes. So by doing this breathing practice, and this is just one form of learning how to start to heal myself, essentially what I was doing was I was stimulating this nerve that and I keep making a motion here, goes from our brain stem into our stomach all the way down. It's called the vagus nerve. So when we breathe, we're sending messages to the rest of our body, oh shit, something bad's about to happen, or okay, everything's fine, I could just go about my day. I had to learn how to teach myself to breathe the right way again so that my nerves would relax, so that my body wasn't in this mode of always thinking, holy shit, so many bad things are happening. The worst case scenario, bad things are going to keep happening. And so I did the practice for 30 days, wasn't feeling any better. And I remember waking up on the 30th day and I was like, holy shit, I want to turn on the TV right now and I want to watch TV. And something as simple as that, caring about turning the TV on or caring about having scrambled eggs for breakfast, literally felt like a miracle to me because I hadn't felt those things for 2.5 years. And it felt like this light switch had just gone on. And like now all of a sudden I'm back. And I wasn't emotionally back, but at least cognitively, I started to come back. And so I shared my story on LinkedIn. Okay, you guys are probably all pretty connected on LinkedIn because of the industry that you're in. I didn't have Instagram. I didn't have Twitter. That was my one way of communicating. And I wrote my story in a Word document. And a lot more detail than I just shared right now, giving a lot of the X's and O's of what the day-to-day was like. And I put it up, it took 35 minutes to read it according to that website Medium when you post it on there. And I put my telephone number at the top thinking, all right, however many people call me, I'll just call those people back. I'll help whoever I can. So in 3 days, it just starts getting spread around. It gets read 150,000 times. And I get over 400 calls coming in from as far as China. And the commonality on all these calls is that no one's mentioning disorder. No one's saying, Eric, I have PTSD also, which was ultimately my diagnosis from my doctor, or Eric, I have bipolar and it looks different than PTSD in this way. No, everyone was sharing a life challenge they had been through and now where it had gotten them, what negative experiences they were having. So life experiences they were sharing ran the gamut from something as terrible as I lost a child to sudden infant death syndrome 5 years ago and I've never been the same. Right? We understand that's a very traumatic event, all the way to, I had a woman 32 years old call me and say, Eric, I married, I got a handsome husband, 2 beautiful kids. We live in the white picket fence house. We have all the financial security we could want, but I broke up with my boyfriend 4 years into college, right as college ended at 22. And I've woken up every single day the last 10 years with this pit in my stomach, wondering if he was the right person for me. No matter how much I love my husband right now, I still can't get that out of my head of did I make the right choice or not 10 years ago. And obviously I'm not a therapist at this time, nor am I right now, but that's heavy stuff to hear. But what I gleaned from all that information was, well, Jesus, it seems like whether you've been through a lot of difficult events in your life or you're stressing and obsessing and perseverating over these thoughts that have gone on in your mind about questions you have about scenarios you've been in, we seem to all be impacted in similar ways. Sorry about the phone ringing in the background. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So, sorry guys. So I'll try to talk over it as the phone's getting picked up. So I'm thinking there's got to be something that's missing here, that I've spent however many years not getting help for what I've been through. These 400 people have called me and I'm tracking in this Excel spreadsheet, calling all these people back. They'd rather call a stranger or don't know any better in terms of who to reach out to get help. What are we missing here? So I go to the largest nonprofit websites in our country.
Let's kind of look at the ship money.
Andrew, you good? Oh, good. And I take a look. I want to see what is it that's preventing us from, as a society, understanding this topic. So I've noticed 3 things that are consistent across all these websites that I actually felt as a marketer were moving us further away from healing and from understanding, as opposed to what their intentions were to get us to better understand this topic. They were moving us further away from that. So the first is, and you see, these are still the campaigns in 2019-20. These were the campaigns back in 2017 as I'm doing this inventory on these websites. So the first is, the campaigns start with 1 in 5 people are mentally ill. Well, if we're saying 1 in 5 people are mentally ill, yes, 20% of people is a lot of people, but what are we saying to the other 4 in 5 people? What are we saying to 80% of the population? if things that happen to us in our life, like the things that are so common that I listed on that previous page, impact our mental health, we're basically leaving 80% of the people to hang out to dry here, because we're telling them they're normal, fine, okay, and healthy. There's nothing to see here. Don't worry about it. Second thing I noticed was all of their actual campaign, just like Nike has Just Do It, were an action word followed by stigma, and they all copied one another. So it was stop the stigma, erase the stigma, break the stigma. The reason why that was problematic is because you're taking a group of people that you're believing to be the protected group, the 1 in 5, and you as an organization are saying there's a group of people out there in that 4 in 5 group who are stigmatizing these people over here. I've never seen a social change campaign that's pitted two groups of people in society against one another and actually brought about positive change. In fact, when my brother went through cancer, the change of the way he was treated between the 80s and 90s, and where in the 80s, people were afraid to go near him, thought that they might get cancer if they get close to him. In the 90s, they're bringing him chocolates and there for him with flowers. It was this campaign that everyone knows someone affected. It put everyone on the same playing field. So this campaign, I felt like, was actually separating us further. And the final piece was the way in which the media was talking about it. You know, Andrew said it's getting talked about more and more publicly. It is. The problem is the way it's getting talked about. If you Google Britney Spears mental health, this is the picture that comes up. Lindsay Lohan, Everson Griffin on the Minnesota Vikings, Kevin Love. What we hear about is we hear about the celebrity name, their disorder. So Britney Spears has depression and then the erratic behavior. She shaves her head. Lindsay Lohan has anxiety. She dresses like a hot mess. Okay, Charlie Sheen has addiction, looks like a skeleton, can't get up out of his bed in the morning. If you combine these three, that 1 in 5 people are mentally ill, not for the other 4 in 5, we need to stop stigmatizing that 1 in 5, all the rest of you healthy, normal, fine people out there. And by the way, what the 1 in 5 looks like is all these people doing these crazy erratic things. Well, no wonder why we have the majority of our population that doesn't understand what mental health is, doesn't pay attention to it, and doesn't think it's for them. That was the reason why we came up with the whole Same Here campaign. So Same Here, meaning it's an American Sign Language sign. It's made like this. So your thumb pointed at your chest, your 3 middle fingers curled, and your pinky pointing out the other person is, let's get away from this idea in 1 in 5, and let's talk about the fact that 5 in 5 of us have faced challenges in our lives that have impacted our mental health. Yes, it exists on a continuum, and yes, it's at different levels, but if you could find me a person in this world who hasn't been through one or some of the things that I listed on that page with that green ink kind of getting all over their bodies, I'd like to meet that person, because that means they're skating through life completely like they're Superman or Superwoman and nothing impacts them. So taking this Same Here campaign, being in the sports industry, I just started reaching out to folks that I had relationships with in sports. And so I know we're in New York, so I'd be remiss if I didn't call out a great guy who played goalie for the Islanders recently, was then with the Blackhawks, now with the Golden Knights, Robin Lehner. He had reached out. He decided to wear the Same Here on his helmet, now moving forward for the rest of his career. Started to get in touch with people from all different sports, whether it was Hayden Hurst, who's a first-round pick, just got traded to the Atlanta Falcons, Derek Anderson, who played in the NBA for a number of years, won a championship with Miami, Chimika Holtzclaw. The one that I always got to laugh at is Kobayashi, who's the hot dog eating champion from Nathan's. And it became an international thing as well. Like the gentleman to his left is John Kerwin, who is probably the most well-known rugby player in the world from the New Zealand All Blacks. He was kind of like their Michael Jordan of rugby back in the day. And so the idea was to get all these people, regardless of the level of celebrity that they've been able to attain, to share that they have a Same Here story also. Not that they have a disorder. If a disorder is part of their story, that's fine. But to share what's gone on in their life, what challenging experiences they faced, so that everyone else in the world can relate to this idea that Same Here, I have a story as well. And I wasn't going to go very far if we didn't also have ways to teach people to start to heal. So once you get people better understanding what mental health is, and that we all have a story, and that this stress and trauma accumulates and builds inside all of us, what are we going to do about that build? Well, similar to the plaque in our arteries, where we're going to run on the treadmill, we're going to work out, we're going to box, we're going to kickbox. If I asked any of you to name 15 things you could do for your physical health, you'd name them like it's nothing. But if I asked you 15 things you could do for your mental health, you'd think, I guess headspace or calm, I'm not really sure. So what STAR is, it's an acronym for stress and trauma, so the things that build up inside of us. Active, meaning we're doing activities. Release and rewiring. So we're actually releasing and rewiring the stress and trauma that builds up in our system out of us. And you see a number of the practices that are listed here, obviously in a short period of time, impossible to go through all of them, but I'll send Andrew the link so that you guys can go through them. These are pretty much all free links. I put this stuff up there because I don't want anyone else to suffer the way that I did, not knowing where to turn based on only being told, take this magic pill and it's going to get you better. So STAR practices are what we do. We bring those into offices. We bring those into schools. We bring them into colleges. We bring them into servicemen and women and first responder groups. We bring them into sports teams and leagues. And it's everything from storytelling to sharing ways in which we can build a mental health routine and start to heal. So right before taking some questions, I just want to share with you all what we're all going through right now. Where is the stress and trauma build coming from? It's coming from three main macro buckets right now. Most of us know this first bucket because we've lived it for the last month, 3 months, 4 months. It's the immediate what ifs. So what if I get sick? What if my friends get sick? What if my family members get sick? What if I'm in the hospital alone? What if my business dries up? What if I can't make the same living that I did before? So okay, we all can appreciate and acknowledge that that's the case. But there's two other buckets that are affecting us that maybe we don't think about as much. One is change in routine changes our identity and changes our purpose. So when we're used to going out and we're used to showing apartments or showing houses, and we're used to getting paid money for it, and we're used to having numbers on the board, and we're used to seeing how we're doing relative to our goals, and that gets taken away from us, what that does is people, when they think of routine, they're like, oh, go to the gym, pick the kids up, do the work, do this. There's a routine related to our work that gives us that purpose and identity. Sometimes it's not so healthy that our work gives us that purpose and identity. And so I would challenge everyone to think about what else we define ourselves as. Are we great parents? Are we great uncles and aunts? Are we great people and friends, right? What else is important to us, right? But what I want you to get from this is, if you feel like you've been floating in this kind of black hole, blank space for a while, it's not very uncommon. In fact, it's probably the thing that I hear most common over the last couple of months is that this loss of routine has taken away this idea of who am I right now? I just feel like I'm kind of floating through life right now. The third macro bucket is these subconscious thoughts. So let's use myself as an example, and you could put yourself in my shoes and then sub in whatever things you might be thinking of. All of the things that we used to use for distractions, things like going to the gym, things like doing sports, things like watching sports on TV, things like going out to dinner with our friends and family, things like going out to meet friends at bars, those things were completely taken away from us. Those things were the distraction mechanisms that kept some of the things that were beneath the surface that we dealt with earlier in life from coming to the surface. Is that a healthy practice? No, it's not necessarily a healthy practice. However, it's what we did. It helped us cushion that. And when things started to surface a little bit, maybe we worked on it, maybe we didn't, maybe we tried to push them back. But what happened during this period is, because all we had to distract us was Netflix, and that kind of got boring after a while, is we started to realize, well, shit, all right, these things that have bothered me in the past are starting to come to the surface more. For me, the way that it manifested was I started to have dreams about the things that I haven't worked on and that I haven't gotten to the source on. And so if you look at the totality of these three together, and again, there's obviously more when you think of from a micro bucket perspective than these macro buckets. But if you combine them all together, what this looks like is, it literally looks like it is a pot boiling over with water. And you've just had too much water in that pot from too many things building up. And so what STAR tries to do, what I showed you on this previous page, these different practices, is to create a hole in the bottom of that bucket, to literally start draining that bucket out so that the bucket doesn't fill up anymore. You're releasing and rewiring that stress and trauma that's built up in your system. There's no one right answer. So if I went to the gym with you all, and with some of you I did weightlifting for free weights, for other ones I did universal, for other ones I did, elliptical or treadmill, you could each get in good shape depending on what's best for your body and what you enjoy doing. Same thing goes for the STAR practices. not any one of these that work any better than the others. Each of us heal differently, and each of us are able to release, rewire that stress and trauma out differently, but it's finding the ones after going through them and trying them out that work the best for us. So I know you all, you're in an industry that's different than mine, but I'll tell you this, where the similarities are. Having worked in professional sports for 15 years, you're constantly on the go. There's constantly deadlines. There's constantly games coming up where you have numbers that you have to hit. And the way in which you have to balance and manage your future versus your life is similar. When they're high performing, situations. Luftig, your kids are having a good time in the background?
No, I think it's Eric.
Oh, okay.
Not Eric Kussin, Eric Gislan.
Got it.
I helped you up there.
So,
can you mute or Anna? I think Eric, you can mute him. You're the host.
All right, let's see.
Mute the other Eric. There you go.
Oh, he muted himself? Okay. So in some cases I get it. Some cases I get that I don't get it because I'm not in your industry directly. But think of the macro way of picturing this is there's all stuff building up inside of us. And how do we work that stuff out of us? How do we recognize that it's not a weakness to ask for help? It's literally doing gym for the brain. That's the important way for us to look at this topic and for us to discuss it. So whatever you all have questions on, I know Luftig, didn't Al say that?
Yeah, there are a few questions here. So a lot of people have anxiety getting back to work, right? It's 3 months of, they've done a little things here and there, but it's kind of the first day of school, right? You dream about what's the dream that you go to school naked kind of thing, Yeah. Another question is, how do Main Street people become more empathetic to mental health sufferers? Those are two of the questions we got.
Yeah, no, I appreciate both those questions. So let's start with the mainstream one and then kind of move back from there. Hopefully this presentation was an exercise in that. The reason why mainstream folks don't understand it and don't relate to it is because they haven't been educated on it. They don't know what it is. When I go and I do these sessions with mental health professionals, okay? So I've done 17 now with school professionals in the New York area, ranging anywhere from 100 people to 500 people at a time. And I break them up into small groups and I ask them on a sheet of paper in green on the left side, write the positive word associations that come from the term mental health, from what you hear from your students, from your parents. On the right side, write the negative word associations in red that come from the term mental health. Okay, I'm using the same term at the top up on the screen, mental health. I've added those up over the 17 times I've done them. And the top 20 words that come up most consistently are all negative words. Crazy, out of their mind, loss of control, psych ward, okay? So think about that juxtaposed to how we think of the term physical health. If you go to a magazine rack at an airport and you see a magazine about physical health, you're looking at men's health, men's fitness, women's health, women's fitness, and you're seeing six-pack abs, you're seeing cut people, airbrush, and you're seeing have greater sex in 3 days, and you're seeing, great nutrition, right? You go and you look for anything that's mental health related on Time magazine or People, and there's a sad face of a person on the cover, their head is drooped down, and it says, get inside of my brain and feel what it's like, okay? So the way in which our society understands this topic is still in the context of mental health equals mental illness. Those people who are severely affected, no one else is affected. And if they are, it's not close to that level, so they're fine. They're just going to get over it. All right.
I think unfortunately, we have to wrap this up. And I do say, unfortunately, why don't you give us some parting words? We certainly all appreciate your time. This has been amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, guys. So my parting words are this. Look, I think we're at a time in society where we have more and more people opening up and talking, but what they're talking about and what they're sharing is still not necessarily getting us to a place of greater understanding. And so my challenge to you all, but also my hope for you all, because I'll send materials to Andrew to pass on, is that that you think of mental health, you come out of this thinking about it differently. You wouldn't eat a cheeseburger every single day for lunch and French fries and not work out and not think about how it's impacting your physical health. By living through the things that we live through, the example that was given before, the anxiety that you live through because you're coming back to work, or what we just went through with those 3 buckets, that's like eating a cheeseburger for your brain. You wouldn't allow your body to get completely out of shape where you did nothing for it and you just allow it to get worse and worse and worse. Think about that when it comes to your brain. Think about that when it comes to building this routine to getting yourself to a greater place. You don't want to have that heart attack of the brain, that breakdown like I did. You want to get yourself to a place where you're able to handle more, where you're able to discuss more, where you're able to feel more. And again, I'll share that more with Andrew in terms of tools and resources and stuff, but I see folks are having to hop off right now. I really appreciate the time. Thank you guys for inviting me on. And if you guys have additional questions, please send them Andrew's way. And I'm happy to get in touch and discuss with you all.
What's your email? I'll put your email in the chat real quick.
Sure. It's Eric at, you guys will laugh at the title, weareallalittle.crazy.org.
We are all a little crazy.
Yep. .org.
.org. We are all a little crazy.
Yep.
All right. Amazing, Eric. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, guys. Have a good rest of the day.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.